But first, an independent panel of experts says there are doubts that Poland's investigation into the plane crash that killed President Lech Kaczynski was an objective one. Warsaw agreed that pilot error was the main cause of the tragedy in Russia last year, but there are still differences between its findings and those of the Moscow-based Interstate Aviation Committee. Let's get more now on this from Igor Piskunov. And Igor, the dispute over the reasons behind the catastrophe has been going on since the crash itself. So what's the final word on that?
Well, in general, it's clear that the conclusions made earlier by the Polish side and those made by the Interstate Aviation Committee here in Moscow are similar in the sense that it were the actions of the pilots which caused this catastrophe. But after the media conference held here in Moscow by the Interstate Aviation Committee, it's also clear that their approach to detail is different. First of all, if the Interstate Committee says that the pilots ignored warnings from the air traffic controller and decided to attempt to land the plane anyway, despite the weather conditions, the Polish side says that the pilots' decisions were correct. It's just that they were not able to implement them. Also, there's an issue of psychological pressure. It is a fact that the head of the Polish Air Force was present in the cockpit at the time when they were trying to land the plane, while according to all international rules and regulations, that is strictly prohibited, and the Interstate Committee says that that alone can be viewed as direct psychological pressure, whilst the Polish side says the head of the Air Force was simply standing there monitoring the situation. I was able to personally speak with the chief technical expert of the Interstate Aviation Committee, and here's what he had to say on this.
The presence of the commander-in-chief of the Polish Air Forces, who was actually the person who was a main commander for all the crew members. If a person like that enters into the cockpit, and even we can see that several times he informed the crew about the actual altitude. So you may say that he was doing some of the actions of the pilot not flying. So our pilots and our experts and we as a technical investigation team, we definitely consider this to be a psycho-emotional pressure on the crew members.
Another issue very important here is that the Polish committee concluded that the airstrip itself was not ready to receive the plane on that day. Well, according to the Interstate Aviation Committee, that airstrip is certified to receive planes, and even though there were minor defects, they solely could not have possibly led to the plane crash. The Interstate Committee has also outlined that they are an independent international body, whilst the investigation conducted by Poland was being done by a state committee questioning its objectivity. But all in all, the actions of both the Polish committee and the Interstate Aviation Committee are not aimed at pointing a finger at somebody responsible for this disaster. They're simply a study of what was going on that plane on that day, whilst separate investigations by prosecutors are still being conducted.
Igor, thanks very much indeed for that update live from central Moscow. That's RT's Igor Piskunov.